Josh, what's going on down there in Delaware?
Well, we just like you guys up in New York, we have to stomach the storm that went by. I think we're going to be off the turf all week long. So with the Saturday show coming up, I did handicap the races to be off the turf. And unfortunately, we're supposed to get some rain for Friday into Saturday morning. So let's dive on in. We don't have a lot to choose from if we do come off the turf, but I'll tell you what, Peter, there's some money to be made and some favorites that can be beat.
I love to hear that. And we were saying, cancellations, races off the turf. Hey, there's still a winner in every race, and sometimes the track conditions and or off turf situations can create opportunities, especially when you're talking about fixed odds betting. Let those scratches come in. Take a look at those first prices. Maybe you can find something that you really, really like. We're starting off with
Pete. That is a really good point too, because with the more variations, the more holes there are going to be in the market. And we're not going to be perfect with them. So if you're there and you think that you've got a bit of an edge, you can snipe early and get on and try to find those overs early as conditions change. So if you want to have a bit of a guess at the weather, you can get some very good overs, which, that's a very good point to see if you can shop early, because there might be some really good value for you there for horses getting double, triple the odds on horses if you can back your own ability.
the name of the game. Getting over is an international gambling expression, which you just call here an overlay, when the price you're getting is better than the price on the board. And that's something you have many, many more opportunities to do with fixed odds betting than you do with traditional tote betting. Josh, general question first. When the track at Delaware gets wet, is there a prevailing bias? I mean, I think typically when it's active rain, often helps horses who are on the front just because the kickback gets so nasty. Is that something you see at Delaware?
I think so. Even from a race caller's point of view, Peter, we look for horses that don't have any mud on their silks. And in the case of the question you asked me, I do feel like a lot of races when we get a rain affected track, which is surprisingly not often here in the 3 years I've been calling here at Delaware, you really need to be on the front end. I can't really remember someone who's a mud soaked mess that's closing from out of the back of the pack. So I believe with a sealed track, I noticed they don't race on the rail here at this particular track. So I really feel you need to be within the first 2 or 3 lanes on the lead. And those sprint races, route races, of course, Peter, can be a different situation. They have more time to get their legs going. But to answer your question, yeah, I think you have to be on the front end here at Delaware to really have a say when the track comes up anything but wet, fast, or even good. If it's muddy, if it's sloppy, yeah, it's probably on the front end.
Yeah, and it's so you got to pay attention to, because a drying out track can be the opposite story at times. But it sounds like that sort of prevailing bias we see these days, where you don't necessarily want to be on the rail, but you do want to be forward. Just something to look for. But of course, if you're going to play the bias game, as Mike Maloney, the handicapping professional and author, says, you better do it on your toes if you want to dance with bias. Let's talk about race number 2 at Delaware on Saturday. We've got fillies and mares, $16,000 claimers, going 6 furlongs on the dirt. Field of 6 as of now scheduled to go postward. Doesn't look like there's a ton of pace in here to my eye. Josh, who do you like?
This race here, I'm going to go with number 1, Fancy Warrior. As you pointed to, this race just has no pace. And I don't know about handicappers out there, but I treat a non-winners of 2 lifetime like a maiden race. And I say that because the only win was versus maiden. So they really don't have experience beating other horses that have won 2, 3, or 4 races. Getting to the meat and potatoes of this, number 1, Fancy Warrior, had a couple of runs down at Colonial, wasn't disgraced last time out at 5.5 to 1. Tracked in that particular race, was 3 wide, was closing in late. I'm hoping with that buyer speed figure of 58 last time out, that's one of the strongest ones on the paper race. And you guys, I think Fancy Warrior at the 12.5 level last time out should be okay at $14,000. And I definitely would put the punters in the right direction if you're going to back the 1, Fancy Warrior, on fixed odds.
The next race is the very next race. We move on to race number 3, and we've got a maiden claimer that we are expecting to come off the turf. And Josh, I know you were very interested to talk a little bit about Tough Enough in this spot.
Yeah, that race is what I like to call a stale race. From a handicapping point of view, any race that's a year or older from today's date, I call them stale races. So this horse debuted on the week of the Kentucky Derby, May 7th at Churchill Downs. The horse flashed a lot of early speed, only lost by half a length when everything was said and done. It was a key race where the third place finisher came back to win its next race. Fast forward, the horse didn't start for over 2 years, was at Colonial on the turf, really didn't run a step, showed a lot of speed last time out 7-1. Because this race is going to possibly be off the turf, this horse is entered for the main track only. There's only one horse in here that has pace, and that's the 5 Tough Enough, Catch Tough Enough to cash on Saturday.
Dallas, let's just do a quick tangent. I think this is a good chance to just reiterate what happens to, let's say, and I don't think it's going to happen exactly in this situation, but those turf prices we showed, the race comes onto the dirt. What happens if you've already made a bet and then there's a surface switch with fixed odds?
Well, generally what we're doing at the moment, Pete, when it is dicey, we're not going up until the decision has been made. So therefore there isn't any early bets. But funnily enough, our ideal model is basically to have the situation where if you've had a bet beforehand, so open it up, and then all the scratchings come out. Obviously, the market is totally different, so we need to adjust that as a bookmaker. But we now have a feature of closing price. So if you're trying to have a bet before the markets are up, you can select closing price, and then you get the last price that was bet on fixed odds, which is generally competitive because the percentages are going to be generally better as you get closer to the race. So what we're hopefully developing in the next few weeks will be the ability for one, if anyone's had a bet before off the turf happens, that they can then cancel their bet. Normally in fixed odds, you can't cancel a bet, but allow that for that change because it's obviously a dramatic change and some people have a different opinion. But for those still holding a ticket, that then moves to a closing price. So whilst that isn't there yet, that's the perfect model that we think we've been able to come up with, which enables early betting on the turf races, and then also we're being a little bit gratuitous to ourselves, protects us from betting 20-1 about a horse that's going to be 2-1 on the dirt. So we thought that was the right balance for it, and that's where we'll get to hopefully in the next coming weeks. But for the moment, when it's even if it's a very minor possibility, we won't go up on the turf races until the decision has been made.
I think that's very sensible. That's an exciting new feature. One of the things we're going to be doing on these fixed odd racing shows is talking about the evolution of Monmouth bets and fixed odds betting in America as we go on. So we'll have plenty more tangents along those lines to keep folks up on all the new and cool features, like different promos that come up and also different ways of wagering. Let's move on to race number 7. This is another one originally scheduled for the turf. This one does not have the main track only entrance that race 3 had. Originally scheduled for 5 furlongs on the turf, will run the same distance on the dirt. Moon Boots, not just a hunch play for those remembering a 3rd grade fashion. I don't know if they have Moon Boots anymore, but I definitely had a pair at one point. Josh, talk about this horse and why you find him interesting in this spot. Why do you find her interesting in this spot?
So the replay was interesting because the horse had a very slow start, rushed up, still won by 2 lengths going away. This race, I think you'll probably see maybe 2 or 3 scratches because a lot of these horses do have dirt form. There's 2 horses on the paper race. I really wanted to point to the 7 Honey Bella. I think the horse is the speed coming in from Canterbury. The problem is this horse has had a bad case of second-itis. 3 second-place finishes. If the pace is hot, which we all know at 5 furlongs might not necessarily develop, I think Moon Boots is going to be sitting off the pace. And guys, Moon Boots, she is the absolute class of the race. And this is only the 2nd start since June. I think last might have been a prep race. And if the horse runs back to those parks races, just like the replay, I think Moon Boots is going to be knocking those boots right on the door of the winner's circle.
I like it. 2nd off the layoff, back in just 11 days off that 101-day layoff, and all that good dirt form in the book. It's easy to see the attraction to Moon Boots. It will be very interesting to see how this finally gets priced up. Moon Boots, a juicy potential early price, but of course with the surface switch, we'll have to pay attention. Go back to Monmouth Bets, check it out. Make sure you pay attention to all those late declarations, etc. Well,